Sienna, welcome to the show.
Yeah, Brad, thank you so much for having me.
Hey, glad you're here.
Me too.
So, you're an herbalist in training. What exactly does that mean?
So, I'm in the process of studying herbalism, which is the study of using plants or herbs to basically help support and heal the human body. So,
What
in
what
layman's
is
terms.
right? What does that consist of? Like, does that you're learning, different types of plants and what they do?
Yeah, so you have to learn a little bit about the body. So, I've just started learning more of a deeper dive into anatomy because you got to know how the body functions to know what you're looking at. And then looking into how plants have certain properties that work to support the nervous system or your gut, for instance. So it's a lot of information on details of plants and the body.
Right.
Yeah.
How did you even try to get why'd you want to get into that in the first place?
Well, I've always been really interested in kind of natural health and just how we can restore our health through what we're given naturally that we can find on our own. And I actually started out on the path to nutrition, but but that's a lot more of a debated topic. Herbs are a little
Okay.
bit more black and white in the sense that you kind of either believe they work or you don't believe they work, but everybody has the perfect diet in mind.
Right.
So I started to kind of go down that pathway a little bit more because there's so many ways that you can use herbs in cooking and just your day-to-day life just to help support yourself even if you're not sick.
Well, I mean, I think like I haven't studied that much, but it's when I look at it from the outside, it makes sense because before we've developed all of our technology and all of the modern medicine and stuff like that, the pharmaceuticals and stuff like plants were like they're natural. So before we had all that, it's like what did we take to survive? It had to be this type of plant or this helped with this. Like, and
Yeah.
people must have known that. And I feel like this is a little bit I guess on the conspiracy side, but it seems as though maybe that the knowledge about the plants and how they can really help people in certain regards was kind of it's hidden knowledge now because of the pharmaceutical industry. And okay, we have these modern ways of taking this drug, so that's it. And since it's a less natural way and it has more side effects, they'd rather you take that.
100%. I mean, the sad truth about the government that we live with is if it takes money away from them, they don't want to support it. That's just how it
Right.
is, no matter which way you cut it. And if you can grow something out of the ground yourself and use it, they're not profiting off of that. There's no benefit for them. But yeah, totally. I'm of the belief that everything on this planet, we all exist for each other. We all coexist together. We all support our existence in some way. I mean, plants inhale CO2 and exhale oxygen, and we inhale oxygen and exhale CO2. It's like, what better relationship is there? You know what I mean? Like, we need each other to survive. So obviously, we're here to support each other. And most modern medicines were based off of plants or
Mm.
some sort of natural source. It's not just something that came out of nowhere.
Right. Are there certain plants that that you consume or are knowledgeable about that have some really good benefits to them?
Well, I was actually just doing a little bit of a deeper study on chamomile, which is really common. People drink chamomile tea all the time. And a lot of people use it to kind of help them relax and sleep better because it is a sedative. But it's also a really powerful nervine, which means it works to help your nervous system. And so it's really good for anxiety and depression and stress. It's also good for muscle tension if you use it externally. And it's also good for digestive issues, and it's just like plants like that where we kind of know a little bit about them. They have so many more uses than so many people know. And it's something that a lot of people have just in their cupboard. So I
Okay.
love chamomile. I do.
What about what about cannabis? Because I know I'm from New Jersey, so it was recently legalized, and
Yeah.
there's the science says it's good for you, the science says it's bad. Everyone's clashing. What's your opinion on all that?
I love cannabis. Can't lie. I have had some of my most spiritual moments on cannabis. But I do think just kind of like with anything else, there's a balance. And also now that it is legalized, they're kind of pushing for the highest THC levels. The most you can, the biggest bang for your buck, because that's what we get.
Right.
So I think if used properly, and if you know what kind of works for your body, and you don't use it as an escape mechanism, because I think that's what it can become for some people, then it can be a really powerful tool, and it can be really healing. And I mean, there's so many studies on CBD and what that can do for your body. So I'm definitely pro cannabis, but again, like everything else, you got to know how it works best for you.
Right, because yeah, like you just said, a lot of people I know around me, for example, in the culture I live in here,
Yeah.
everyone's always partying all the time, drinking and smoking, not because they're doing it they're smoking for the spiritual aspect, but it's like, all right, I'm trying to escape my life. I don't like what
Yeah.
I'm doing every day, so I need
Yeah.
something to make me feel better.
Yeah. And the sad truth
What?
is a lot of people don't even know that that's what they're doing. It's kind of like they
Mm,
just know that this feels good, and they're like, I'm going to keep doing that. I'm going to keep doing that. And then they're piling all of this shit on top of them, and they're burying it even more.
right. So in terms of the spiritual side of it, how has that impacted you?
It's kind of helped. It's been a really big proponent in just opening me up to a whole other world. Like the way that I, on some level, think that plant medicines tend to work is they sort of bring you to the level of consciousness that that plant exists at. At least that's what makes sense to me. That's how I can imagine it. And whenever I use cannabis, it opens up my heart a lot more, and it kind of opens up my mind to just see everything on the world on like a level playing field, and kind of see how everything is connected even more. I mean, I can see that all the time now, especially, but it just kind of grounds you in that knowing even more. And so I've learned a lot through that. And then I also discovered that a lot of the voices in my head or the things that I hear are not always coming from me. I mean, I believe that we always have messages coming from source or from God or from the universe or whatever. And if you can slow down your mind enough, you can hear those things clearly. And it has been a huge tool to help me slow down my mind that is on autopilot, because most of our minds are just on autopilot functioning from the subconscious. It's really helped me be able to slow that down so I can hear the messages that aren't coming from my other strings of thoughts. They kind of just feel like messages that are dropped into my consciousness
Right.
from somewhere.
I think that's really cool. I know there's different types. Is there a certain strain or something that you like more than others, or use specifically?
Um, I know that it's actually more to do with like the terpenes, like
What's that?
the terpenes are the specific chemical compounds in each herb or in each form of cannabis, essentially. Um, and they kind of can be related to like notes. If you're talking about wine, you can smell different notes, and it's
Hmm.
similar in cannabis, but they have different effects and they affect your body differently. Um, but I don't know too much about the specific terpenes and how they affect me. I haven't experimented it with it enough, but I do know that generally I lean towards. Sorry, there's a helicopter.
Nah, that's good.
Um, Generally, I lean towards strains that are labeled as sativa, which is funny because those are actually supposed to make your mind more stimulated. And they do, but it's almost like, personally, my mind already works so fast that it like speeds all my thoughts up so fast that I like get to the end, and then it's clear.
Hmm. Okay.
How about you? Do you like cannabis?
No, no, I don't really smoke. But it's definitely something that I'd probably experiment with in the future.
Yeah.
What about what about psychedelics and stuff like that? Do you have any experience with that or no? Because
Yeah.
I've done a decent amount of research on it, and it's the experiences that I listen to people that they have and stuff like that. It's because people have such sometimes a lot of similar stuff, and sometimes stuff that's like so different, and like this is insane. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I have experience with psilocybin mushrooms, not extensive because I used to be really terrified of drugs and mind altering substance when I was younger. And so there's still a part of me that is kind of facing that fear of really letting go of what I know to be our physical reality and really open myself up to experience whatever I'm meant to see. But I've had a few experiences, and kind of similar to cannabis in the fact that they just really open you up and they break down what we think reality is, because we exist from such a physical plane and we take everything so literally, but the world is not complete in that aspect. Like, this physical world is definitely not the only thing that exists.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I hear, in like the spiritual community, like everyone's talking about like 4D, 5D, different spiritual realms, all that type of stuff, like astral projection. I haven't experienced that, but yeah,
Me
sometimes
neither.
people talk about lucid dreaming along with that, and that's something I have experience with, which is really cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, how'd you get into like the whole just spirituality as a whole?
Um, my mom kind of introduced me to it when I was younger, in the sense she introduced me to meditation. And then I also just remember when I was a kid hearing about different religions, and because I didn't grow up in a super religious household, but I just remember thinking, if there are so many religions, how can any one of them be true? Because they all claim to be, we're the one.
Mm-hmm.
And so that didn't make any sense to me. And then when I started learning about meditation and um, all of that kind of stuff, I was just like, okay, this makes more sense. It's all very personal. And it all kind of shifted me and started really into a self-love journey, because I used to really have a poor relationship with my body. And so through trying to heal that is really what opened me up into the world of spirituality and all the craziness that exists.
Right. Yeah. It's. I mean, it's one of those things where, you jump a little bit, you take like one step into the rabbit hole, and then you just kind of fall in, and then you can never
Totally.
get out.
Totally. And it's like, once you see forward a certain amount, you can't go back. It's like, I've seen too much.
Right.
I don't know, man.
Yeah. Nah. I mean, it's. I don't know. It's like people talk about like, oh, like certain people are chosen for it and stuff like. I don't know how all that works, but who
Mm,
knows, right? It's like
yeah.
I'm in this experience. I'm gonna run with it.
Yeah, totally. I don't know. I've never heard that, like people being chosen, like the chosen ones in terms of being
Yeah.
able to like see the future or something.
I don't know, just like people have like different life paths and stuff like that, and
Yeah.
I've heard certain people have theories on like before we were born, you kind of chose the life that you're
Mm,
living now, and like
hmm.
the lessons you have to learn and stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I guess if we all come from one singular consciousness, to an extent, I guess it would make sense that we chose it, because obviously we incarnated here for some sort of reason. But I, but again, I think that ties back to like people taking things so literally and physically. It's when somebody says, "Oh, we chose to be here," immediate. It's like, no, I didn't.
Hmm.
Me, no, I didn't. We associate I or me with this body and who our personality is in this lifetime. So when we say we chose to be here, who's that we? Like,
Mm,
what we? It
right,
might be right, but who's the we?
right. Are there any like because since you're into the natural plants and stuff like that, are there any foods and like processed stuff that you just like you avoid eating?
Yeah, I mean, I would be lying if I said I don't fall victim to the system that lives around me. I mean, I live in Los Angeles, so that shit's everywhere, and it can be
Yeah.
really difficult to stay away from when you're stressed out, when you're out of time, when whatever, it's all made for convenience. But I just, if I don't know what something is, if I read it on a label and I'm like, dude, I know that did not come out of the ground, I do my best to avoid it, because it just, I don't, I try not to eat anything where they alter the chemical structure of things. Like, that's what they're really doing. That's why we have food scientists. You're literally changing the elemental structure of whatever this is. And that, I mean, if the earth's not doing that and my body doesn't do that, then I don't want to eat that.
Right.
So I try to stay away from just overly processed foods in general. Like, if I couldn't make it myself, no.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. So I was watching some of your TikTok videos, and you were talking about moon phases and astrology.
Hmm.
Astrology is something that I've never really dove into. Can
Yeah.
you kind of break that down?
Astrology is really interesting, and I actually kind of got interested in it to try and debunk it because I was reading horoscopes and I was like, this is a load of shit. And then the more I learned about it, I was like, wait, this makes sense. I'm not going crazy. But yeah, essentially, the basis of astrology is where the planets were when you were born and how that has an effect on you as a person. But what a lot of people don't understand is that we all have elements of all of the 12 signs within us. And so we're all made up of the same stuff. And what I actually really like about astrology is when you break it down on the element level, because every sign is associated with an element. So there's earth, wind, fire, water. And if you think about the things that make up everything on earth, we're all made of those things. We have some sort of earth in our body for the physical structure, some kind of fire for the, we're electrical beings, we're electromagnetic, that sparks our energy. We obviously have water in us, and we obviously have to breathe, so we obviously have air in us. So we're all made up of those constitutions, or we're all made up of those things. And it kind of just tries to break it down and how that would affect your personality and what things you might go through in life. But also, what a lot of people don't know is there are actually two main types of astrology. There's tropical, which is the one that most people follow, and that is based off of a fixed idea around this earth in terms of where the sun is during the seasons. So it's based off of the seasons. And then there's Vedic astrology, which is actually based on where the planets physically are now, because I forget how many years, every few thousands of years, it shifts of where the placement of the stars are in the sky. And so they say that Vedic astrology is better for prediction because it's literally on the planets, and tropical astrology is better for kind of earthbound things like our personality because that's associated with our physical body, and it's not as ethereal. So, yeah.
Okay. Well, what about so when everyone goes on social media and they're like, "Oh, I'm an Aquarius or whatever." Well, what do the specific signs mean?
So that's the thing. There's like so much more information than a lot of people know on the specific signs. And in terms of the world of social media, most people know the toxic traits. Most people shit on other people's signs or use it as an excuse to get away with whatever the fuck. But it's so much more information than that. Like when people ask me about the topic of astrology and they're like, "Can you do my chart?" I'm like, "Do you have 3 hours?" Like it's a lot to cover. But yeah, they all have different principles. Like they have different elements. They have different things called triplicities. So there's cardinal signs, there's fixed signs, and then there's, oh my god, I can't even think of the third one. But basically, one's associated with being a starter because they're at the start of every season. One's the focused one, and one is the kind of finisher. So it's just all different energies that they're associated with. And when people talk about their sun sign, they're missing a whole lot of information because we're a lot more than our sun sign. And actually, in Vedic astrology, they base someone's personality mainly off of their rising sign, which is where the point the sun was rising at when you were born. So in terms of astrology on social media, it's very limited information.
Yeah, I mean that would make sense.
Yeah.
So in terms of the personality aspect, like, do you believe that it really has that much of an effect? Because I know for when I've read, and I'm sure the only things that I read are the basic stuff, but when I look up, all right, what does this sign mean? And it's just like, oh, you're carrying this and that. I'm like, that could really mean anyone, right? But
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a more of a depth to it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's like I said, it's all very general. But oh wait, what was the thing before you said that? Because now, what was the first part of what you said?
Like when I look up the different signs and the explanation for it, so it's like,
Yeah.
oh, you're carrying this and that. I'm like, well, yeah. I mean, like that could basically describe anyone.
Right. So it's very general. But you asked me a question right before you said that. And I'm trying to
Before,
remember. Yeah.
before I don't remember.
Okay. So good. I'm not the only one. But no, but it's very, very generalized. And they do that on purpose so that, people who want to believe in it can resonate with it. They'll be like, yeah, that's so true. Oh my God. It's meant to kind of
Right.
cover all the bases.
Okay.
But
And so on the more in-depth aspect, like, are you knowledgeable about like yours, for example?
mhm.
So you could dive into that and kind of explain the more in-depth personality explanation as opposed to you're a caring person.
Yeah, it definitely goes because also the thing that has to do with in astrology that people don't look at is that the same duality that exists within all of us. Oh, I remember your question. You were asking how much of an effect do you think that really has on us?
Oh, yes.
Um, but every sign has its duality too, and it's so multifaceted. It's not as simple as you're caring, because every sign can be caring in certain situations, or around certain things. But I do think that it is a combination of astrology, where you were born, how you were raised, what you've experienced, and whatever karma you have in your life that you're fulfilling, however that plays out. So it's a combination of a lot of things. It's never, if I've learned anything in the last couple of years about life, it's never black or white. It's never simple. There is not one explanation for anything. You cannot generalize people, things, anything. And so astrology can just be a nice tool to kind of give you hints into your personality and into other people's personalities to see how you're acting. And it's actually can be a really good healing tool, because if you're like, okay, if I might be more reactive in this situation because I'm an Aries, then maybe I should check myself, like be more aware of what might be coming out of me,
Mm.
as opposed to just, yep, that's me. I'm this because it said so.
Right. I go, going off of that, I think that applies to a lot of other aspects in life where, people kind of try to avoid the responsibility of, how they act or how they feel and stuff like that. Something I talk about with a lot of people is like, bad things happen to all of us that might not necessarily be our fault, right? And
Yeah.
so everyone's like, all right, this person did me wrong or this happened to me, so this is just how life is. This is how I have to feel about for the rest of my life. And I try to explain to people like you're accepting that, and you're
Yeah.
voiding the responsibility of the work you have to do. Like, yes, it's not your fault that that thing happened to you or someone did you wrong, but you are responsible for how you choose to feel about it, and throughout the rest of your life. And if you're able to move on from it, because someone can easily do something to me today and I can hold on to it for the rest of my life, and personally I'm the only one who's suffering, right?
Yeah.
Or I can like sit there and analyze, all right, why am I feeling this way, and then actually be able to move on from it, so that if I ever do think about it in the future, which I most likely won't, but even if I did, I wouldn't get angry or sad or whatever emotion it originally evoked out
Absolutely.
of me.
Yeah, absolutely. People totally lose sight of the aspects in life that they actually have control over. And when somebody else hurts them, yeah, like you said, it's so easy to just put the responsibility on that person because they started it. It's kind of like that classic thing when kids are fighting and a mom says, like, stop fighting, and the other kid's like, well, they started it. It's like, well,
Hmm.
you have to finish it. You can't leave everything up to the other person, and even if that person did come back and apologize for the things that they did, you still have to forgive them. You
Hmm.
still have to be able to let that go. Otherwise, it's worth nothing. But yeah, people definitely chalk. So many people, we're so used to putting our responsibilities on other people, for sure.
Right. Yeah, and it's a difficult thing. Like, if you're used to doing it, it's not just gonna be a shift like this overnight. Where you're like, all right,
Right.
I'm now moved on. Like, it takes time, but
Totally.
the first step is always just becoming aware of it.
Yeah. And even just becoming aware enough to recognize what you're holding on to is not an easy task. Like I was saying with when we were talking about cannabis, learning to slow your mind down enough and slow down those automatic thoughts can be really difficult, especially in the world that we live in today. I mean, my God, I can't imagine like the kids who were born once iPads were already a thing. Like I have a nephew who's 4 years old, and the iPad is his best friend. And so
Hmm.
it's like it's so easy to just pick something up that distracts us before we actually really just listen to what the fuck is going on in our head.
Yeah, no, I genuinely believe like the world is. I don't know what's gonna happen, because in terms of all this technology stuff, it's how how is this going to, like, the 4-year-old who has that iPad and is getting distracted at that age? throughout their teenage years, and once they reach like, adulthood, it's like, what are the how are they is anyone going to analyze their thoughts anymore? Or are we just going to be
Right.
like robots on command, which we already all of us are to a degree, but but like I feel like the conscious awareness is just going to be like it's not even going to exist at all.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's pretty crazy because it's like all of the people who are new parents or will become new parents within the next few years. There's such a big decision on how you want to raise your kids because you will either raise them super unconsciously or super consciously because that's kind of what the choice that we have as a humanity right now is how we want to live personally, and then how is that going to affect the generations down the line, because most of the time people are born, they see what their parents did or didn't do or what they went through or didn't go through, and we want to avoid or copy something. And same thing with our parents, they're working to make sure we didn't have the life that they had in some aspects. And so I think that's what we're going to see. Like there is going to be a huge split between the people who are living so unconsciously that they're so disconnected, and then people who are going to be raised in hopefully more conscious way of living. And it might take a while to see the generations change, but it's already happening.
Yeah, and it really, like, that decision to, I guess, raise your child unconsciously or consciously, like, that will dictate the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Like, and sometimes, there can be shifts. Like someone might be raised unconscious, but throughout their teenage years or 20s, they might have, a moment or, a few months time where they're kind of learning new things and they start to become a more
Yeah.
conscious being. But, in terms of how you raise someone, like the first 7 to 10 years of your life, like you're being programmed, and those
Yeah.
programs are running in your mind and you're not even aware of them.
Yeah. Yeah. You're like a sponge. You just soak up everything.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, yeah, who knows, man? Like, because I know there's a thing where, if you're raised by an alcoholic and there's two kids, one can also become an alcoholic and then the other never touches alcohol. So it's really just because at some point we do all have a choice. Like you said, when you're a kid, it's all subconscious and you're just going through life, absorbing everything and learning. But once you get to a certain age, you have a choice to look at the world around you. And you can either continue just being taken by life, or you can be like, nope, don't want that for myself.
Mm.
Yep, I want that for myself. And you can kind of change things. But at my nephew's age, at 4, he doesn't know.
Right, exactly.
So who
So
knows?
do you think keeping, the spirit of your childlike self is important
Oh
to
God, yeah.
keep alive?
Oh, of course. I mean, that's who we are at our essence. Everything else is just piled on top. It's just all things that we're told we're worried to do. Life is kind of just thrown at you as an adult, and you got to worry about taxes. You got to get your groceries. You got to do this. You got to do this. And we all have responsibilities no matter what our life looks like. But it's so common for people to let their responsibilities outweigh their imagination or their wonder. And that's really where the magic of life comes from, you know? Like you made that post the other day about finding and connecting with your childlike wonder, and it's so true. It's everything is just so much easier, and yeah, that's where the magic of life exists. I think it's so important.
Right. I think because that's where all the curiosity and the creativity stems from. It's like you can just, if you're out in public and you see like a 5, 6 year old kid, you just notice that they're looking at everything. They might look at you and just stare at you because it's like they're just curious about every different being they see, every
Yeah.
object, everything. And it's like we most of us, like, we once we get to like the teenage years and onward, it's like we kind of lose the ability to see things in that light and still be curious about things. Like I think so many of us get to this point, and I was at that point once, where I'm just like, all right, well, this is just how life is.
Yeah.
Like it's just blah. But like
Yeah.
it doesn't. I think what we don't realize is, it doesn't, like, sure, there's gonna be things that you're gonna have to do that you don't want to do, but life doesn't have to be like that all the time.
Right. Yeah, totally. And I feel like as teenagers, especially, I was like this as a teenager. I was a biatch. You think you know everything. You're like, okay, parents, I don't want to fucking deal with you anymore. Like, I got it. I can do everything. And then it kind of just stems from there. And once you get older, you're like, no, I know. I already know the things that exist. I know what I have to do. I know, I know, I know, I know. And yeah, like you said, that curiosity is not there. But when you're a kid, you're just like, oh my God, this is new. What is that? Oh my God. But it's so funny because kind of connecting to that point, I have expressed to my partner that this is the first spring that I've experienced that I'm really, really like appreciating for what it is, because I've been so much more focused on plants after starting herbalism. But walking down the street and seeing the flowers, oh my God, when like a few years ago, it's like, yep, flowers exist. I know. That's purple. I know. But it's like, do you really look at these things? Like, how does this do this? It's crazy.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's important for everyone to, find that, maybe it's that one thing that is a hobby or that you want to learn more about, or just a bunch of different concepts as a whole. I mean, I
Yeah.
know for me, like, doing this podcast is like, this like helps support my curiosity and stuff. Like, I talk to people and have conversations about, some like you're talking about stuff and I'm like, oh, I haven't heard that before. And it's like, I'm genuinely curious to learn about this stuff. And it's like, if I just sit here and think I know everything, I'm just going to sit in the same place for the rest of my life and I'm not going to
Yeah.
grow at all.
Yeah, totally. And I think that you can really find your curiosity in presence, because yeah, that's just when you're open to everything in conversations with people, when you're by yourself. If you're present and really just witnessing what's going on around you, you're going to see something that you didn't know. You're going to hear something that you didn't know. But it's so hard for us to be present when we get older because we're focused on so many things.
Yeah, but it's so important because that helps bring like the joy back. Like I noticed that I've been working hard on some things in my life, and it's like, all right, throughout the past week, like I'm doing this all the time, and it's kind of like time isn't even really like I'm not even like aware of what I'm doing. I'm just doing it. I'm just
Yeah.
working, right? And
Yeah.
it's like, and I went outside yesterday. I was reading a book by Wayne Dyer about the Tao the I don't know how do you pronounce it, the Tao Te Ching, I think it
Mm-hmm.
is, by Lao Tzu. And I was sitting there outside in nature reading about it, and I'm reading it and I'm looking up and I'm like this is what I've missed. Like reading about these spiritual concepts, being in nature, like this is life.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. I feel that way whenever I go on a hike. I love to go on hikes, especially living in the city, that you can kind of see the city from a higher vantage point, and you're just like, that's not life. That's a bubble.
Hmm.
That's all built by somebody else. That is just a bubble. And I'm sitting here on the other side looking at the ocean and with these trees. And I'm like, this is life. This is real life.
Right. And I think, because we live in, these houses or an apartment or wherever you live, it's like we're so much of the time inside that it kind of like takes
Yeah.
us away from our roots, which is nature and being outside.
Yeah. Literally. I mean, literally, that's the term roots. That's where we get it from, right?
Right.
Yeah. It's crazy. And you can totally see how we've been pushed inside even more over the last couple of years. I mean, after the lockdown happened, it just got so comfortable. I find myself struggling with that in my own right, you know. It's just so easy. It's I don't have to stress about anything. But then at the same time I realize I'm stressing because I'm not
Hmm.
happy. I'm not doing what I want to be doing.
Yeah. How how important is sexual energy?
Um it's everything. Like at the base of life, it's everything. And it's what creates life. And we've been taught that it's dirty and that it's, lustful and all these things, but it's literally the energy that creates worlds. And sexual energy, I think, exists in a lot of different ways that we don't understand. It's not just about humans having sex. It is, like you said, an energy that exists in many different physical forms. Whatever the earth needs to sprout a tree in and of its right is some form of sexual energy. That's just what we label it as, but it's the energy of creation. So, yeah, it's very important.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I watched a video that you made and I really liked it about, taking that sexual energy and kind of transmuting it and, bringing it up and applying it to other aspects of life because I mean, when I think about it, that feeling is like instead of just getting rid of it, it's like using that, and like imagine you actually just taking that and like applying it to, your creative outlet, or even, what you're working on maybe, it's at a job or whatever it is, like taking. And I think that also ties into like, the joy of life and creativity, and all these concepts we were talking about before. It all ties together.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Yeah, people just throw that away because it's a physical pleasure. It's just meh, it's just something easy. But yeah, holy shit, if you can harness that and, like you said, apply it towards other things, the things you can make, the things you can build in this world are unbelievable. I mean, we all know how amazing humans are in so many ways. Like, look at what we've built. And sure, not all of it has had amazing outcomes, but oh my God, we're unbelievable.
Right. And I mean, I think we don't always acknowledge that. And it's like, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of bad things, but it's also like, I mean, just the fact that we've like been able to do what we've done, just, improving certain living conditions, and, all this different type of stuff. It's, I mean, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And, it also always leads back to the question. It's like, how did, like, we can look at history and stuff, but of course that's not completely accurate. And it's like, well, even, before the stuff that was documented, even if some of it is right, it's like, where did we really start? And like, how
Yeah.
did we get here?
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. I know. I was just talking to my partner about this the other day. I was like, dude, our history goes back so much farther than we can ever understand. Like, all this shit is speculation. It's sure,
Hmm.
some of it might be the most logical explanation for things, but we have no fucking idea. We have no clue. And even just hearing history from people that I know telling stories about each other, there there's something wrong. I'll never
Yeah.
know the whole story, And but yeah, humans were amazing, and we can build amazing things, and it just depends on where and how we direct our energy. And I also think that we kind of, especially with the topic of global warming and how we kind of ravage this planet being such a hot topic, it's very easy to see ourselves as pests, to see ourselves as something that's harmful to the rest of the planet, which obviously we can be, but it doesn't have to be that way. And we are
Hmm.
also amazing things. There was I think they're watching me for some reason.
Yeah.
um, there was an Alan Watts talk I was listening to a while
Mm.
ago, and he was just talking about virtue and how um, something in itself can be completely virtuous and beautiful, but you can have a plague of virtuous things. And once you have too much of a good thing, it can become a bad thing. And I forget if it was a proverb or something, but the road to hell was paved with good intentions. So, we just have to accept the fact that we can create things that, as much amazingness that they can do, there's always a downfall. That's just part of life. That's the duality.
Right. And it's Alan Watts is someone I really enjoy listening to,
Me
because
too.
it's like his vocabulary, his vocal tonality, the way he explains everything is so beautifully said, and
Hmm.
the concepts are incredible.
Yeah.
But also, it's like, if we look at someone like that, we have this perception of like, oh, this guy is like, he's perfect, he's got everything figured out. But when you truly listen to him, it's like he's speculating just as much as other people are.
Totally.
And also, it's like, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think I did a little bit of research, and apparently he was an alcoholic and he
Yeah.
died from alcohol. So it's like,
Hmm.
you would have this vision of like, all right, he's this perfect guy, complete spiritual harmony and stuff, doesn't have any vices or anything, any negative habits in his life. But it's like, he wasn't a
Yeah.
perfect guy, but he
He's a
was definitely
person.
very intelligent.
Yeah, totally. I know. I read something saying he was blasted for most of the talks he gave.
Uh-huh.
And it's like, yeah, he's a person, man, and you can understand those things, and you can believe in those things, and put them into practice. But we're humans, and we fall victim to our emotions, and we fall victim to the world that's around us, and life happens. But it is it, and like you said, it's all speculation. We're all learning. We're all just trying to figure it out. And you can be so intelligent and still fall victim to human tendencies. Just is what it is.
Yeah, and then there's always the question of like, all right, is it better to live a life that's completely disciplined and you never do anything that might have a negative effect on you, or is it okay to indulge in some of that stuff sometimes. I mean, I think ultimately they're like you said with everything, nothing's black and white, and so it's kind of just it depends on what you want for your life. Like if
Yeah.
you want to be completely disciplined and not do any of that stuff, okay. And if you want to indulge in that stuff sometimes, okay. And it's kind of like, all right, you kind of, and it's like, you know, whatever you decide to choose, it's like if a certain outcome stems from a decision you made, it's like, all right, at least you hopefully consciously made the choice.
Right. Right. And I think that's the thing is just being able to make those decisions consciously, because there's going to be a balance with everything. Discipline is important for your happiness, but letting yourself be free is also important for your happiness. And if you have too much of one or the other, it can lead to unhappiness and not being in peace with yourself. It's like the same thing with comfort. It's freedom to be comfortable is great, but if you overindulge in that comfort, you realize that you're doing things that aren't fulfilling and you can get stuck in that place. And then, like you said, if you're just always disciplined all the time and you feel like you can't do anything even if you want to, like that sucks too.
Yeah.
So it's really just finding that balance. And like you said, I think is key is just making those decisions consciously, because otherwise you're just kind of gliding.
Yeah, and then like you get into circumstances and situations and you're kind of like, all right, well, how did I even get here?
Right.
And it's kind of like you look back and you're like, oh, like I made these decisions for the past 2 years, but I wasn't even aware I was doing that.
Right. Right. And then a lot of times we tend to blame them on other people. How did I get here?
Yeah.
It's your fault.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah. Do you think how much of an effect do you think music has on us?
music is clearly powerful. I mean, it brings people together. So I think it has a huge effect. I've always thought about that. I'm like, the fact that music can bring people together from all over the world who don't speak the same language, who don't know anything about each other, it can be huge, because we're so used to being divided. And that's the other thing. We can be divided by one thing that we know about somebody. I mean, take politics, for example. You can label somebody as a Republican or a Democrat, and if that's the only thing you know about them, you're allowed to hate them. But with music, it's connection. It's the opposite. It brings people together. And I also think it's really powerful in terms of our subconscious mind and accessing our mind. And I don't know how much you know about, or if you've ever looked into like spells and witchcraft, and that stuff is all kind of
I
fanciful
haven't.
to a lot of people, but it's based in very natural and realistic things. But the language of English was made by somebody, and it was made very intentionally by somebody. And so the English language has a huge effect on how we see things, because I forget who said it, but it's been said many times that the language that we speak affects the world that we see. We see the world through language. That's how we understand things. And so if you can manipulate the words and what they mean, then it's kind of ingrained in our subconscious mind of what we're looking at without even realizing that that's what it is. And music definitely has the power of that, because repetition and tonality and tune, if it sticks with you, if it's catchy, it's powerful. It's replaying in your mind, you know?
Right. You know, I've also, I mean, when you were talking about the spells, you know, it's like, you know, it's called spelling for a reason, because it's like the words you talk, or it's like a spell, and
Exactly.
it holds whatever meaning, you know, you believe it does, and that like affects the outer world and your inner world as well. Um,
Absolutely.
and I've heard about, you know, the music industry kind of, because you know there's different, I'm sure you're aware, like there's different sound frequencies, like they have different hertz and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is true, but you know, I've heard that the music industry and most of the major artists that we listen to, they kind of switch the frequency to a more negative one that might not have a great effect on us.
Yeah, I've heard that too, that they change it, I think, to like 440 hertz or something instead of because 432 hertz is supposed to be like a universal tone that
Hmm.
helps you connect. But yeah, they tweak it a little bit to make it seem a little bit off. So yeah, that matters a lot too, because that has an effect. Frequency has an effect on us on a cellular level that we can't even see. So who
Right.
knows? Who knows what that's doing?
How do you how do you think people can start to trust the universe?
Hmm. The easiest way that I fall into trust is just looking back at my own personal history and looking back and going, even when I was in my shittiest moments, I'm okay now. The universe somehow guided me to get where I am today, to come out of that shitty situation and to just be all right. And I'm not always going to be all right. I'm going to have more moments where I'm going to feel like I'm stuck, where I'm going to feel like it's all over or whatever. But if I know that eventually I'm going to be gone one day and I have no control over, really no control over when that is, I got to trust that God, the universe, or whatever is going to make that decision for me. And when it's my time, it's my time. And everything in between then, the universe is going to put me where I need to be. It's not always going to be somewhere that I like, but there's going to be a reason I need to be there. And you can always learn. You can always learn something from your experiences. So,
And people, you know, I hear a lot of people also, you know, some people meditate on death and, you know, think about it often. And I think about it a decent amount. And so I don't know if, I don't know if you can get to, I think about it in the sense of like the goal of like not being, you know, completely afraid of it. It's like, yeah, I guess nobody never really knows what's going to happen after, if something's going to happen, if it's just going to be nothing. But I think about it like if there is nothing, it's like, you know, I mean, we can't even really perceive what nothing is.
right.
But, you know, if it's just like the void, like pretend you're sleeping and you're not dreaming like that, it's like, you know, that's not so bad. It's
No.
like, you know, it's like you just don't exist. And it's,
Yeah.
I guess it's, I think the main reason we're afraid of dying is because, you know, we have relationships with people and we have these ideas of, you know, what life is like, and we want to be able to eat food and we want to be able to do this and stuff. And it's like, it's because we're so attached to everything. So,
Yeah.
you know, death is kind of like the unknown. So it's like, all right, we might have to let go of all of that. I don't want to do that. But
Yeah.
it's, I guess it's, I think it's thinking about it in the sense of like, all right, it's, well, whether you want it to happen or not, it's going to happen. So kind of get to a state in your mind where you're like, all right, like, you know, if it, whenever it happens for me, you know, it's just going to happen. Of course, I want to do things to optimize my health in the best way and control I possibly can so that I can
Yeah.
live a longer life. But,
Yeah.
you know, it's like, you know, sometimes I guess, you know, like if you hear about someone who like got hit by a bus and just dies, like it's like it just happened.
Yeah.
And it's like if that was me right now, like I walked outside right now and that happened, that would suck. But also it's like, you know, what am I gonna do about it, right?
Right. Right. Like I have no control. And I think, like you said, totally, it's the unknown. And we all have such a fear of the unknown because our ego is attached to keeping us safe. And it's like, if we're going towards something that we don't know, how are we going to know how to keep ourselves safe in that situation? Um, but yeah, it's going to happen to all of us. And we can be so attached to this physical life. But, you know, who knows? Like everything that happens surrounding death is all speculation. You know, some people have died and come back and they have visions, and some things match up and some things don't. It's like you can't fight it, man. And I also think that there is an obsession with trying to live as long as you can. There is this
Mm-hmm.
idea that the longer you live, the better life that you have. But I want to keep myself healthy so I can enjoy my life while I have it, no matter how long I live. Because if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not eating healthy, I can't do a lot of things I want to do. I can't go out and be active if I'm, you know, obese in the way that I want to be active. I can't do those things. So
Right.
I'm not doing that just to try and live as long as I can. I want to enjoy my life while I've got it. So I got to do everything that I can to make that a reality for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. Sienna, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, dude. This has been great.
Yeah, no, it's been a great conversation. Where can people check you out?
You can find me on Instagram and YouTube under, a lot of people say this wrong, but it's supposed to be Sienna Anemone. It's like a play on sea anemone. But my name's Sienna and then Nemone. And on TikTok, I'm the same, just with an 11 at the end. And yeah, you can catch me there.
All right, sounds good. We'll catch you guys
Awesome.
in the next one. Peace.
See you guys. Thank you.